Critical Role seems more likely than ever to be headed for an Exandria without gods. But just what could that look like? And has Critical Role been laying the groundwork for this since way back in Campaign 1?
Sneaky, sneaky, sir.
In the latest episode of Critical Role, the Archheart offered up a very intriguing new plan to run the gods out of Exandria, meaning that now it's not just up to Ludina succeeding to wipe the gods and the last of the D&D/Wizards of the Coast IP out of Exandria. But what could that look like now that it appears Critical Role is really going to pull the trigger on killing or chasing off the gods? Will it be a complete cataclysm or just business as usual? And have they been setting up this exact situation since way back in the Vox Machina era? Why not hit those like and subscribe buttons, and let's investigate the possibilities for what an Exandria without the gods might look like for Critical Role Campaign 4. So the big question is, what changes if the gods either get eaten or simply flee Exandria to escape Predathos and never come back? What would change in Exandria if the gods just vanished and stopped granting their powers to the faithful? To look at that first option, let's go back to the Mighty Nein campaign for some clues. Specifically, let's take a look at Jester, who has already proved you don't need a god to be a cleric. The relationship between Jester and the Traveler showed us that gods aren't the only beings capable of granting divine powers, and that may be Critical Role tipping their hand as to how they plan to replace this current D&D branded pantheon of deities. With the power vacuum in the wake of the gods leaving, clearly other beings like the Traveler, aka Artigan the Archfey, can step into that void and assume those roles. And it doesn't even have to be creatures like the Archfey, as we know that the Raven Queen was once a mortal who defeated the previous god of death and ascended to godhood to replace them. So while the next Traveler Con may see its attendance explode as mortals look for the few remaining sources of divine power, Critical Role has clearly shown that they could simply raise up some worthy candidates to replace the missing gods, either as full-blown deities like the Raven Queen, or possibly, since you may need to actually defeat a god as part of the ritual to ascend, just a bunch of sort of demi-quasi-gods like Artigan stepping in to fill the role, growing in power as their worshippers swell in number until they basically become full gods unto themselves. Or it could be that mortals fill that void with the recovered technology from Aeor, and other ruins from the Age of Arcanum. Ludinus is currently using that technology to try and release Predathos, but we know that somehow the Raven Queen was able to ascend to godhood in the Age of Arcanum, and perhaps that technology is just waiting to be uncovered deep in Aeor. And to go all the way back to Campaign 1, this seeding ritual that the Raven Queen used may have required a god that the ascending mortal had to replace, but we know of another example where even a failed ritual that didn't replace a god still basically created a lesser deity, that being Vecna. Vecna grew in power after his failed ritual just based on the worship from his Remnants cult, essentially becoming a lesser deity in his own right. So clearly, even without a god powering part of the seeding ritual, either with their essence or their own life, a mortal can rise up to godhood under the right circumstances. So that's one option, with the powerful creatures of Exandria racing to fill that power vacuum and just sort of becoming the next pantheon, and all the potential conflict and war that would entail. But what if the Archheart is right? What if mortals simply needed their god to let go and give them freedom, and they don't seek to replace their missing deities? A world without gods isn't as uncommon as you might think. That's basically the entire premise of Dark Sun, a D&D setting where the Primordials, their version of Exandria's Titans, actually beat the gods, and the gods just never took hold. You still had powerful wizards and strange psychic dragons running around trying to act like gods, granting small pieces of their power to their most devout followers, but for most people it was more about where you were from and your community. You were a citizen of New Kern, or a member of a specific tribe of nomadic elf dune runners. Like, that was how you identified yourself instead of being a follower of this or that god. And for a more possibly one-to-one comparison, you have Kryn, the world of Dragonlance, where the gods were also sealed away, unable to interact with their world for centuries. You had no clerics, no paladins, no temples of worship, and life was pretty much exactly the same. People still found the occasional reason to go to war over territory or ambition, but there were also decades and decades of peace and prosperity. With the loss of divine magic, people turned to arcane knowledge, herbalism, and other studies to advance the prosperity of mortals. If anything, massive-scale conflicts like the Calamity became almost impossible, as there was no healing magic to fall back on if things went poorly for your side, so no one was willing to take that risk. And that was largely true until the gods found a way back in, and the War of the Lance began. So Exandria with no gods would potentially look basically identical. The temples might get turned into apothecaries as alchemists and herbalists took up the healing slack caused by the departure of the gods. You might see a massive advance in the state of enchanting magic, as wizards and artificers look to replace those lost divine protections with powerful items that can replicate those divine abilities. The Archart really might have been speaking the truth when he said that without their gods, their children could finally grow and evolve. So which option will Exandria be left with after the end of Campaign 3? Based on the amount of foreshadowing we have seen with the Traveler and the Raven Queen's ascension going all the way back to the days of Vox Machina, we'd have to assume that Matt Mercer has a plan in place to simply swap out the Pantheon with new, lesser deities. This lets his players keep on playing clerics and other divine classes if they want to stick with D&D for the next campaign, and basically sort of gets them back to a new status quo where they simply own all the IP and don't have to worry about Wizards of the Coast or D&D gods being the last spanner in the works. But as Matt has shown before, when his players choose unexpected options, he tends to just roll with the punches. So depending on what Bell's Hells do in Campaign 3, Campaign 4 could literally take place in an Exandria without gods, or at least with just a few demigod stragglers like the Traveler hanging around. And honestly, that could make for one of the most interesting Critical Role campaigns yet. So what do you think? Is Matt going to switch out the gods for new versions, or simply create an Exandria without gods? Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.